Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. I like to think of myself as a champion of underrated JRPGs. I view video games as an art form, and there is meaning and value to be found in more than just a Van Gogh or a Monet. These games I'm going to talk about today are games that definitely do not deserve some of the hate that they've gotten. Some of them didn't receive hate at all, but the discourse around them dried up way too quickly. And some of them you might have overlooked entirely. So without further ado, let's get into these 10 overlooked and underrated JRPGs. I didn't give Blue Reflection much thought when I first heard about it. I mean, I'm a man. A manly man. Why would I want to play a game that looks like High School Girl Simulator? Oh, and they're magical girls too? What do I look like, a weeb? Don't have to answer that. But as time went by and I started exploring the more niche side of the JRPG space, I started to hear the siren's call of Blue Reflection. Maybe I shouldn't put it that way. It started to look interesting. How's that? It was super overpriced when I picked it up, but I didn't care. I was a JRPG collector, all caps, and I was going to give this game a fair shot. And you know what? I ended up loving it. The premise is this. You play as Hinako, a high school ballerina who can't dance anymore due to an injury. On her first day at a new school, she finds herself sucked into another world, a place where humanity's subconscious minds intersect, called the Common. Hinako quickly learns that she has powers in this new world, and not only that, but her ballet injury is gone. She's joined by two other girls who explain that all three of them are reflectors, and it's their job to protect the world from the Sephiroth, not him. They're these ancient and extremely ugly monsters that come around every million years or so. Just Hinako's luck, they're due to show up any minute, of course. In Blue Reflection, you split your time between the real world and the Common. In the real world, you'll interact with other students, getting to know them and helping them solve problems. Sometimes part of that problem solving involves diving into the Common and identifying the subconscious source of their issue. There, you'll fight a bunch of nasty monsters that are manipulating people's emotions in the real world. And you can bet that by the end of most every chapter, you'll be squaring off with a Sephiroth. Not him, different guy. It's a fun gameplay loop, if not entirely original. There are definitely echoes of Persona in here, but it does quite a lot to make itself stand out. Most notably, this is one of the vibiest games I've ever played. Particularly in the real world segments, there's something almost nostalgic feeling about it. And that's despite me never having once been a Japanese teenage girl. They really nail the aesthetic. Blue Reflection didn't have the best reviews when it came out, and it's since been pretty much completely overshadowed by its sequel, Blue Reflection Second Light, which, to be fair, yeah, it is an improvement over the original in just about every way. I've even called it a masterclass in iterative game design for the way it fixed the original's issues. But that doesn't mean Blue Reflection isn't worth playing. It has a moving story, fantastic music, and a fun battle system somewhat reminiscent of games like Grandia. I definitely recommend seeking it out, particularly if you're looking to dive into the sequel at some point. Never before had I anticipated a game like Final Fantasy XV. I was basically a kid when it was announced, back when it was still called Final Fantasy Versus 13 for some weird reason. And then delay after delay after delay sent everyone's hype plummeting. It's hard to sustain excitement for something for more than a decade, even a new Final Fantasy. At the point it came out, I can't even imagine how much money Square Enix had spent on it. When it finally did release, there was quite a lot of fanfare. There was an anime series, a freaking movie starring Aaron Paul. It was a big event. I got the game and I absolutely devoured it. I was in love with every second. The setting was the first in a Final Fantasy to go the giant open world route. Cruising around in your convertible, listening to classic Final Fantasy songs on the radio, just taking in the gorgeous scenery. This was exactly what I was hoping it would be. Your four characters also worked their way into my heart with very little effort. I could see echoes of my own friend groups in their dynamic with each other. The way they'd playfully make fun of each other, but always be there to support one another too. I also love the story. Never before had a Final Fantasy taken the approach of locking the perspective, for the most part, on one small group, showing their reactions to the massive events happening around them without frequently cutting away to context-establishing scenes elsewhere. It felt very classic novel, in a way. A Bildungsroman about a prince growing up on the road with his friends while his world falls apart around him. It was only well after I'd finished the game that I caught wind of how other people had responded to it. People hated this game, y'all. It made absolutely no sense to me. There were some complaints about the combat system, like how you could only control the main character, Noctis, and how it felt sort of hack and slashy. But the biggest complaints were about the story. I was completely baffled. How could someone have that strong of a negative reaction to the story of this masterpiece, I thought? How could they not have been as moved as I was by these characters? In time, I came to be a bit more sympathetic to the issues people had. It's true that to some, it feels like important story context was missing. I think in large part, a lot of people just weren't ready for a game to be told this way. I've seen movies, read books like this. Think about like a first-person novel. The camera doesn't cut away to show other characters and events in that kind of book, right? I just viewed Final Fantasy 15 as a game told through a first-person perspective, but not like that. You know what I mean? Over time, the developers put out a ton of DLC chapters exploring other angles of the story and filling in gaps that people were upset about. Honestly, it felt a little like when I have a YouTube video that isn't performing well and I start making drastic changes to my thumbnail to try and right the ship, you know? They had a vision and people didn't resonate with it, so they tried to course correct. And from what I understand, it did seem to help quite a bit with people's issues. The version of Final Fantasy 15 you can play today is very different than the version I fell in love with when it first came out. While I don't think it needs the changes they made, it's a complete and full game in its own right, at least in my opinion. If you're looking to play it for the first time, I think it's safe to say that those problems have been addressed. So regardless of where you fall on this, I think Final Fantasy 15 is a safe recommendation. If you haven't, definitely check it out. The Legend of Nalyuta Boundless Trails is sort of the red-headed stepchild of the Trails series. Wait, is that offensive? Am I allowed to say that? Well, I am a stepchild, and I have a lot of red in my beard, so I think it's okay. I am a red-headed stepchild. Yeah. Anyway, every mainline Trails game from the beginning has involved turn-based combat and long, complex narratives with a huge party of characters. The Legend of Nalyuta does the complete opposite. The story is about Nalyuta, a boy living on an island in the middle of the ocean. This island is well known because of the fact that mysterious debris from some ancient civilization keeps falling out of the sky around it. Whole ruins will just unceremoniously drop. It's very strange, but it does help the tourism industry, not to mention all the scholars who flock there to try and learn what they can. While exploring a ruin with his friend Signa one day, Nalyuta meets a fairy named Noi. They also run into a crazy dude and his masked friend who apparently want to destroy the world. It's actually more complicated than that, but I don't want to go too deeply into the story. Suffice to say, what follows is a series of challenging levels as Nalyuta makes his way around the ancient land in the sky, the source of all those falling ruins, and attempts to save both that old world and his own down below. I always knew about this game's existence even well before it was finally localized over here. It was a PSP game, and I tried it out a bit on an emulator. It seemed fine to me at the time, but I couldn't really follow what was going on, so I didn't stick with it. But thanks to NIS America officially bringing it to Western audiences a couple of years ago, I finally got to dive deep into this game. And what I found was an experience of questionable connection to the broader Trails story, but with a solid story of its own to tell. Not to mention addictive combat and some of the coolest bosses in an action RPG I've ever fought. It's not overly long either, so it's one you can knock out in just a handful of play sessions. It was a really good palate cleanser as I made my way through my most recent playthrough of the entire Trails series. Nalyuta doesn't have terrible reviews by any means. It's a solid 75 on Metacritic, which is respectable, but feels low to me. Sure, it's an older game brought back with only a minimal amount of updating from its PSP roots, but it was a solid Falcom action RPG back then, and it remains that today. So even though you can't call it hated, I think it's safe to say that it's definitely underappreciated. As a Trails fan, I'm really eager to see if and how the story of Nalyuta feeds into the broader Trails story. There are definitely some hints, or some suggestions at least. Without spoiling anything, let me just say to those of you who have played Nalyuta, is there anything that seems familiar to you here? Some things that maybe you observed in, say, Trails Through Daybreak 1 and 2? Do certain characters and environments and, say, mission objectives seem to ring a bell? I won't say any more, but suffice to say, I don't believe that those things could possibly be a coincidence. Anyway, even if you're not a Trails fan, if you just like lighthearted and solid action RPGs, Nalyuta is definitely worth a play. It's got all the tight gameplay you'd expect from a Falcom game. Okay, I'm sorry in advance for this, but I just need to rant a minute. Why aren't more people talking about this game? I feel like a crazy person. Visions of Mana is one of the most beautiful pieces of video game fiction I've played in the past 10 years. It's graphically gorgeous, it has super lovable characters, and it has a story that manages to be emotionally complex with twists that will punch you in the freaking gut. I love this game, and I feel like it came out and it just landed with a wet thud. Maybe that's not a fair assessment, I don't know. The reviews aren't bad, though much like Naida, I feel like they should be way higher than 75. Sorry, that's the end of my ranting. Let me tell you why you're missing out if you haven't given this one a try. In Visions of Mana, you play as Val, a young guy who's tasked with becoming a soul guard for the Alms. All right, I'm throwing around some terminology here. Let's take a step back. In the world of Visions of Mana, every 4 years, a fairy visits all the major settlements and chooses one person from each to become an Alm. Their job is to travel to the mana tree and then sacrifice themselves to keep mana flowing throughout the world. This whole aspect of the story is so interesting to me. Like, there have definitely been stories about self-sacrifice before, but the way it's handled here is so unique. Almost everyone in this world considers it a deep and profound honor to be chosen as an Alm. There's no bait and switch happening. The wool isn't being pulled over our eyes about what it means. We know as well as the characters do that they're on their way to their own deaths. But they accept it. They actually welcome it. This aspect of the story is handled so brilliantly. As the journey unfolds, and as you learn more about the world, including some things that maybe you'd have been better off not knowing, it starts to throw into question the meaning behind the tradition you're upholding. As Val, it's your job to keep the Alms safe as you pick them up one by one on your way to the mana tree. Each of the Alms is a powerful fighter in their own right, and this is where the Mana series' famous action RPG combat comes into play. You can swap between party members quickly and easily. Combat is fast, but still feels weighty. Lots of hard hits and dashing and dodging. Beyond just the ability to character swap, you also have access to a pretty robust class system. You'll gain a bunch of different jobs as you progress, and each uses its own weapons and has its own skill tree. This means you have a ton of customizability in how you want to set your party up. This game truly has some of the coolest fights in action RPGs, and you'll have a ton of attacks and magic at your disposal. I mean, this is the resurrection of the Mana series. I'm completely baffled by the sort of tepid response from the JRPG community. If it hadn't been a great game, I guess I could understand, but this is truly a great game. I've only ever been a casual at best Mana fan in the past. I played Secret of Mana like every 90s JRPG kid did, but I didn't delve beyond that. But now that I have this one under my belt, I want to go back and experience the rest of the series for myself. It's truly an achievement, and we really need to get the word out so more people pick this game up for themselves. If the series continues down this road, I think it's going to become an even more important part of Square Enix's repertoire, so let's see if we can help make that happen. I avoided this one for a long time, I think because I was getting it confused with Half Minute Hero. Look, if your game's title involves a reference to an amount of time, I'm going to get it confused with something else. I know in that Half Minute Hero game, you have to complete a series of like RPG-ish tasks within 30 seconds, and that sounded just stressful and not fun to me. Fortunately, the longest 5 minutes is actually true to its name. It's about the most crucial 5 minutes in the life of the hero, but through a series of flashbacks, we actually get a full game out of it. Let me break it down a little bit. You are a hero, the leader of a party of warriors, and you finally made your way to the castle of the Demon King. The game begins with that final battle, very reminiscent of the classic Super NES game Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, for anybody who's played that. But before you can unleash your ultimate attack on the Demon King and end his reign of terror or whatever, he casts a spell on you, causing you to forget your entire journey up to that point. Through talking with your party members, the hero gradually begins to remember his past bit by bit, and with those memories come the skills he needs to eventually take the Demon King down once and for all. It's such a cool premise for a story, and it's one of those that would only really work in a video game. There have been plenty of stories about characters with amnesia. Heck, there have been maybe too many JRPGs about that alone. But this one tackles it in such a unique way. There are basically two main types of sequences here. In one, you're talking with your party members and making choices during the conflict with the Demon King. Through those choices, the hero unlocks memories, which then leads to the second type of sequence, the traditional JRPG segments. In those, you and your team will explore towns and caves and towers and have to fight random battles. You'll find equipment and other gear that you can use to finish each particular memory. All of the JRPG segments are like short stories, and they're fed to you completely out of order. One of the fun aspects of the story is piecing together the fragmented memories you get as the game progresses. The gameplay in the JRPG segments is admittedly pretty basic. The fights themselves aren't particularly challenging, and you're not likely to get lost in any of the dungeons. I think that's where a lot of the game's criticism comes from. It's definitely not a challenging experience. But honestly, I don't think it's trying to be. It's using the medium of video games to tell an interesting story in a wholly unique way, and it's taking chances with the formula that we've all grown very accustomed to. It's not an epic story, it's a small and intimate one, and what you take from it is dependent upon your willingness to meet it on its level. But this is a game that is worth experiencing for what it manages to pull off in this medium. You'll look at the graphics and think, there's no way I'm going to be moved by anything that happens with these characters. And then you'll find yourself blinking back tears and wondering where in the heck this game has been your whole life. And then you'll remember, oh yeah, I kept getting it confused with that half-minute hero thing. Omori is a hard game. I don't mean that in the sense that the fights are challenging, although that's true as well. I mean that it tackles some incredibly dark and heavy topics that make it a hard sell for a lot of people. Early on, you can see how it's setting up this profound juxtaposition between its cute, Earthbound-esque graphics and aesthetics, and its deep, almost horror game level commitment to making you uneasy. It's a tough one to sum up in a way that doesn't give too much away, but I'll take a crack at it. You play as a little boy named Omori who lives in a pure white room. Every now and then the door to your room opens and you find yourself in a fantasy land where you get to play with all your friends. You have wild adventures with them, traveling around a magical world and defeating monsters. It's bright and colorful and cheerful, and obviously you know right away that something else has to be going on here, right? You also play as Sunny. Sunny is a teenage boy alone in a house in the suburbs. His mother is away finalizing their big move, meaning Sunny has the run of the place. He's tormented by nightmares while asleep and sometimes even while awake. One morning, there's a knock at the door. It's an old friend of his, one he hasn't seen since he stopped going to school and locked himself away in his house. This friend convinces Sunny to come outside and see everyone again before he moves away. But his friend group isn't quite the same as it used to be for some obvious and some subtle reasons, and it all ties into why Sunny decided to shut himself off from the outside world. Sunny and Omori are the same person. That's not a spoiler, it's super clear right away. Omori's story is happening within Sunny's imagination. There, all his friends are together and nothing ever goes wrong. Out in the real world, there are consequences to Sunny's disappearance from the group, and even bigger consequences due to the event that caused him to pull away. That event is one of the big revelations the game has to offer, so obviously I won't say anything more about that, but suffice to say, it's one of the reasons Omori can be such a triggering game for some people. Gameplay-wise, this feels like what Earthbound would be if it continued on as a series and saw new innovations in each subsequent title. The core gameplay is very similar to that game, with combat taking place from a first-person perspective via turn-based menuing. Where it differs is both in overall presentation and in some of the more interesting mechanics. Visually, the enemies and backgrounds are beautiful, looking like colorful sketches come to life. Surrounding the battle screen are pictures of your party members with their current state of being shown in their expression. The main crux of the gameplay involves emotions. Your characters can be in a variety of emotional states, like angry or sad or happy. Certain emotional states cause you to be strong against enemies of a particular different state, and weaker against others. You'll have a variety of attacks and items that can inflict different emotions on both your enemies and yourselves, which you'll need to do in some of the tougher fights in order to have an advantage. It's an addictive gameplay loop, and the animations and sheer variety of enemies make it a ton of fun. This game reviewed pretty well overall, but it's one of those that I just feel doesn't come up in the conversation as much as it deserves to. If you can stomach the content, it's an absolutely vital game to have under your belt. Highly, highly recommend this one. It's been a while since I brought up Harvestella on this channel. For a time, I was honestly afraid to, because I felt like I was being annoying. Harvestella this, Harvestella that. I feel like people were like, we get it. You like Harvestella, shut up already. And maybe that's true. But you know what? It's been long enough, and I think it's worth bringing up again. Harvestella went from a game that wasn't even on my radar to one of my favorite games of all time. Before I dive into why it's so great, I want to talk briefly about why I don't think it got a fair chance. It was announced in a Nintendo Direct alongside approximately 6,000 other farming simulators, and Harvestella itself was seemingly being billed as a farming simulator. Sure, it looked pretty cool, but when I saw that trailer, I thought, that isn't for me. not really a farming guy. And that's really just how it was marketed. I remember looking up the Steam page for Harvestella and reading the description and just being furious about it. It said, and I quote, "Harvestella, an all-new life simulation RPG from Square Enix. Lead a life of self-sufficiency with your vibrant house as a base and cooperate with allies to overcome various threats." That does not really describe the game Harvestella. I mean, yes, there are farming elements. Your primary means of earning money and creating healing items is through farming. But to call it a life simulation RPG suggests a much bigger emphasis on farming than what you actually get here. I'd say less than 10% of the game is farming, and you could probably shrink that number down even more depending on how you wanted to play. Harvestella is the story of a world where the seasons are controlled by these giant crystals called seas lights. But something is going wrong with them. Now, instead of one season seamlessly transitioning into the next, there's instead a day in between each season called quietus. During quietus, every crop withers and dies, and if a person finds themselves trapped outside, they're likely to get sick and die too. The one exception to this is your character, a protagonist who finds yourself waking up during quietus, outside and with no memory of who you are or how you got there. The community you awaken is super gracious, and I'm assuming they also don't get a lot of visitors because they just let you live in the farmhouse outside of town free of charge. That's also where you'll do your farming. When you're not farming, which again, takes up such a small portion of your time, you'll be investigating each sea's light and trying to get to the bottom of quietus and why the seasons are all screwed up. The twists and turns this story takes are pretty surprising. In fact, within the first 10 minutes of the game, I found myself faced with a twist that completely changed my perspective on what kind of story this even was. Combat is straightforward action RPG, and while it's not the smoothest gameplay loop around, you do have access to a variety of party members that can grant you new jobs, so you can easily mix up your playstyle whenever you want. The combat may be a weaker point, I'll admit, but it's not bad, and honestly, it's made up for so much by the story and the presentation, and holy crap, the music. Go Shiina produced one of the best video game soundtracks of all time with this one. He's a genius. I don't throw around the word favorite very often. I've used it many times to describe Chrono Trigger and Xenogears, two absolute titans in JRPG history. The fact that I use it to describe Harvestella as well should tell you something. It is absolutely worth your time, questionable marketing aside. It's a new classic. Get it on Switch or Steam, but just get it. Crystar is a bit of a weird one. It's from Furyu, and honestly, I could probably make an underrated JRPGs video and include every single one of their games. They're a collective that brings together lots of big-name outside talent from the JRPG world and lets them work on smaller projects. And while their games never have the biggest budget, they're always bringing interesting ideas, whether it be on the gameplay front or the story side of things. I really appreciate and respect the sort of things they make. They're often at a smaller scale and typically not the sort of thing you'd expect any of the behemoth JRPG developers to want to work on. So with that background, let me tell you about Crystar. It's the story of a girl named Rei who one day finds herself transported to Purgatory along with her sister Mirai. Through a series of unfortunate incidents, Rei ends up indirectly causing Mirai's death. But all hope isn't lost because a couple of demons approach Rei and let her know that if she agrees to work for them, she'll be able to bring Mirai back to life. Her job is to clean up Purgatory by killing off rebellious spirits. Sounds simple enough, but there's a complex story that begins to unravel as you progress. You'll eventually meet up with several other girls who have their own strange circumstances, and they'll fill out your party. From there, it's a series of twists and double crosses until the very end. The story was written by one of the writers of the visual novel canon. If you're familiar with complicated visual novels, you know how crazy those stories can get, and you get to experience that here. Most of the conversations in the game do take place in a more or less visual novel style setup, but those story sequences are broken up by plenty of dungeon crawling and monster killing. One of the areas that this game gets criticized for the most is in those action scenes, and true enough, the combat is a weak point for Crystar. Actions feel a bit stiff, and there's not a ton of variety in either moves or enemy types to make the combat itself feel particularly interesting. It's passable, sure, and there's occasionally a bit of challenge to it, but it's not why you'll want to stick around. This is another vibe and aesthetic heavy experience. It's not the graphics in particular, those are fine, but not extraordinary. It's the atmosphere, the music, the vocal performances from the characters, and all that in service of the story, which is the real focus. Like so many of Furyu's games, this one didn't review particularly well, but if you don't mind looking beneath the surface for treasure, there's actually a lot to love in this game. It's moving and sad and funny and an all-around fantastic narrative experience from start to finish. If I had to describe Mary Skelter Nightmares in 3 words, I would say Gothic Lolita Cinderella. That's pretty good, actually. This is a very, very weird game. It takes place in a world where Tokyo has been absorbed into some sort of malevolent entity. They call it jail. And that's where we meet our 2 main characters, Jack and Alice. No, not Jack and Jill, and not even Jack and Mary, like in Mary Skelter, either of which would have made more sense. Alice, it turns out, is something called a Blood Maiden. These are special girls that have the power to defeat the monsters created by the jail. You'll meet several other Blood Maidens throughout the game, each of them named after some fairy tale heroine or another. The Blood Maidens power up by getting splattered with the blood of the jail's monsters. Yeah, it sounds really gross, but trust me, they somehow managed to keep it from being that way. For one thing, everything takes place from a first-person perspective, meaning you're not seeing anyone get blood splattered. And for another, they made all the blood neon pink. It's very weird. Did I mention that already? This game is very weird. So anyway, the only issue with this blood power-up stuff is that if the Blood Maidens get too blood covered, they enter something called Blood Skelter, which is a state of mind in which they go completely berserk and attack friends and enemies equally. Meanwhile, Jack is special because it turns out his blood actually works to calm the Blood Maidens down. He's equipped with a special gun that connects to his body via IV, and he's able to spray his blood on the girls when they get too worked up. Actually saying that makes me kind of squeamish, but again, there's nothing in the actual presentation of this game that made me feel that way, so take that for what it's worth. This is a first-person dungeon crawler, and while that has never been my genre of choice, I actually found this one a lot of fun. And charming? It's hard to explain. One big positive in my mind is the fact that it's fully English voice acted. I have a harder time connecting with characters when they're not speaking my language, so having a full cast of characters speaking English helped a lot. And the gameplay, while pretty straightforward turn-based sort of stuff, is fun enough and varied enough to keep me entertained. And surprisingly, even though the setup sounds like some sort of grimdark fairy tale for goth kids, it's actually really intriguing. There's a lot of mystery around the events that led up to the world becoming this way, and the secret rebel organization you end up joining has quite a lot of suspicious activity going on as well. There's definitely a pervy aspect to the game that fortunately you don't have to spend time with if you don't want to. If you want to give the girls a good first-person scrubbing when you get back to base, you certainly can. They're not naked, don't worry, it's rated M, not AO. But still, that aspect is not going to be for everyone. But for a game that looks so far outside my wheelhouse, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this one. It got decent enough reviews back in the day, though obviously not so strong that it caught fire and everyone and their grandmothers has played it. I think the whole series is worth paying attention to. There are 2 other games that come after this one. And if you buy Mary Skelter 2 on the Switch, they include the first game remastered for free. You just have to put in a code to unlock it. Something to consider. Eternights is largely the work of one solo developer, but you would be forgiven for having no idea that was the case. It's a gorgeously atmospheric, moody-looking game with stark lighting and expressive characters, all brought to life by extremely talented actors. The action combat is tricky to learn, but so satisfying once you master it, and there's a whole dating aspect on top of the rest of the experience as a bonus. This one is, in my opinion, the very definition of underrated. Made by such a small team isn't even really the right word. I feel like it was held to some unachievable standard just because of how good it looked, and so people felt their expectations weren't met. Let me help you set yours appropriately. Eternights is a short game, maybe 7 or 8 hours. It doesn't have the hugest variety of gameplay. But like I said, the gameplay that's there is challenging and really fun. I almost gave up on it at first, to be honest. There's something about the rhythm of the combat that just wasn't clicking for me. I kept dying in the very first area, and I saw no easy workarounds to cheese my way through the fights. But I kept at it. I tried my best to learn the rhythm and the prompts, and before I knew it, I was having an absolute blast with it. By the time I was finished, it was probably the most fun I'd had with an action RPG in ages. Let me summarize the story real quick, no spoilers. You're a young guy who wakes up one day to find the world is basically going to hell. People are turning into zombies, or something like zombies anyway, and the government evacuates you to a shelter. You and your buddy are stuck there for some time until finally you decide to risk stepping outside. Naturally, things did not get any better in the intervening time, so you and your friend and a girl you meet along the way have to escape. But it turns out she's a K-pop idol? I mean, in a world overrun by zombies, I guess the status of being a K-pop idol probably doesn't mean as much. but still, that's pretty cool. You quickly realize you have some sort of mythical connection to some sort of ancient god. And yeah, if that feels like it came out of nowhere, that's because it kind of does. Turns out all of this, every crazy thing that's been happening, is due, at least in part, to this war going on behind the scenes of the world. And now you're involved. Your arm gets cut off, but your ancient god friend gives you a glowing sword arm to replace it. That naturally becomes your primary weapon as you slash your way through hordes of infected people. The other characters you meet along the way, the ones who join your party, they'll be able to accompany you into combat and provide support via special skills. The way the new abilities get stacked into the mix as you progress feels really good, and since I had taken the time to really learn the combat, it never felt overwhelming to me to learn new things. In between missions, you can date the various characters who join your party. That sometimes involves playing a few different mini games to raise your relationship level, which admittedly can get a little tedious, but it's definitely better than a simple scene indicating your relationship level increased. Like I said, I think people's expectations were unfairly high. This is a great bite-sized game. Don't go in expecting Persona levels of length or character depth and you won't feel disappointed. It's worth trying, and if you can commit to learning the combat, I think you'll enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, well, that's it. Those are my underrated JRPGs that I think you should give a chance. Now, that's not every underrated JRPG I can think of, so I'm sure I'll be back with more in the future. Actually, you can help me with that. Let me know of any JRPGs you think are underrated down in the comments, and if I agree, I might add it to the list. Oh, if you like podcasts, then you might like mine. It's called the JRPG Pursuit, and we put out new episodes about various JRPG-related topics every Wednesday. Links in the description. If you'd consider liking the video and subscribing if you enjoyed yourself, I'd really appreciate it. Oh, and also I have memberships available now if you're interested and able to support me in the channel in that way. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And until next time, bye.